Hi there. Welcome back to Talk and Tankless. I'm Andrew from the marketing team, and today I've got special guests Eric and Jason here on the podcast with me. Eric is a fairly new addition to the team, but he's got quite about it, quite a bit of background on the industry and knowledge, which is why he's here on the show today. So, welcome to the show, Eric. Do you want to do like a short, quick introduction for the audience here?
Sure. So my name is Eric Ashley. I'm the Senior Product Development Manager here at Noritz. And as Andrew mentioned, I'm the newest addition here, but I have a tremendous amount of experience working in the industry for over 15 years, and really just want to help share some of the information and the knowledge with everybody.
And Jason, I know you've been on a few episodes already, but maybe a quick intro from you for anyone new.
Sure. Jason Fleming, Executive Vice President, General Manager here at Noritz. Just had my 19th year anniversary, so going on 20 years.
Congrats, and thank you both for joining today. So just jumping straight into it, Eric, I heard you've been to a couple industry shows and events lately. What was the latest one that you just got back from?
Yeah, so I was just at an energy conference with all the gas utilities, and really the discussion in the gas segment of the market is how to make and reduce carbon from the supply. What they're really focusing on moving forward is going to a point of hydrogen blending and having products tested today. And they're working extensively right now, all the gas utilities, to see what type of impact that has, what amount of hydrogen can be blended with existing equipment. The goal for them is not to require all new equipment. We know gas is going to be around for a while. And how can we make it as green as possible has really been the discussion.
So utilizing the existing infrastructure, but maximizing the result, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, one nice thing is, you use hydrogen for combustion, and your exhaust is water, right? And it's extremely low emissions. It's under 5 ppm. It's very low, very good for the environment. So that helps a lot by being able to offset some of the natural emissions that gas has from combustion. So right now, utilities as a whole have been targeting about 20% mixed in to the supply, and to see how that really impacts and the effectiveness. What they have noticed in some of the equipment, and this just tells you how much more combustion capability and efficiency comes from mixing hydrogen into natural gas supply, is that you could boil water 1 minute faster with 20% hydrogen mixed in. So the heat output is significantly increased when you mix it in with the natural gas.
So how much of a near future thing is this, or is this kind of distant future, but kind of bleeding edge sort of stuff?
So right now, there's several hydrogen hubs actually being developed throughout North America and throughout the world, where they're going to have hydrogen generation through electrolysis process, where they're actually using wastewater in a lot of places to take the wastewater and then convert it into hydrogen, H2, and then blend it in. What they're really looking at is it going to be a centralized location where they start doing the blending, or are they going to have like more downstream, so still centralized but closer to the distribution locations? That's really the discussion that's ongoing right now, is how can they do it? What percentage of the constituency can actually receive hydrogen in the fuel supply today, based off of the pipe age? That's a big thing, right? How old the infrastructure is will really dictate what percentage and how the mixes are going to go. Probably in the next 5 years, you're going to see 5% here in the near term, and then probably eventually getting to 15% in probably the next 10 years would be, I think, the target that most of the utilities are looking at.
So since utilities are looking at things like that, do you think, or do you know of any kind of near term rules or regulations that are kind of in place to kind of steer toward that direction?
Yeah, so there's a lot of emerging policy that's coming up. Really, like in California, there's a proposal that we'll know more about by 2026, that carb's proposing basically zero NOx, going from ultra low, which is 14 ppm, to 0 ppm, which would have a significant impact. That would be for new construction and replacement products on the residential side right now. And as gas manufacturers, in the industry as a whole, and this doesn't just apply to water heaters, right? This is furnaces, anything that combusts gas, furnaces, grills, um, range tops, ovens, dryers. Everything gets impacted by that potential ruling in California. But we have to wait and see, because I think that when once the rule is proposed, and they're taking their time, and CARB is pretty diligent when they make their policy announcements, that could have a significant impact on the market, which would then tend to say that hydrogen mixture in California is really only going to be used for commercial use or industrial use, right?
So, I mean, I think as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking to myself, man, if I'm a contractor, how am I preparing for the future, right? And I think that that's an important part for us, is to give the confidence to the contractor that yes, there's changes. There are going to be some soon. There's going to be some later. But Noritz is prepared with our current product offering, with future offerings. There's different products that are coming available in the pushes with heat pumps. I don't know if there's more conversations on heat pumps, but I think that's the thing that I hear, is just that we're prepared, and we're here to support, but it's just ever changing and trying to figure out the driving push of why, right?
Yeah, I think that really it's the portfolio product we have today, and where we're moving to in the future with our heat pump water heater technology, our condensing tankless, our condensing boiler technology, really is advantageous. That we're prepared now, and we have the ability to get out there and train and discuss with our contracting base, what these rules and requirements are going to happen, because everybody enjoys their gas equipment, right? Like, I really enjoy cooking on a gas grill, and I also really enjoy cooking on my, gas cooktop. I think that uh, everybody understands the value of gas and what it brings to the market. So I think knowing and being prepared that there is going to be a transition at some time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to just be all of a sudden tomorrow you can't install gas equipment. I think that that's the big advantage is we're prepared, and we're preparing for any sort of transition.
It almost sounds like a cool sales pitch for a contractor to be able to say, hey, there's a lot of changes that are coming, and if you do enjoy the advantages of gas currently, through all these different products, buy it, replace it now before you won't be able to do it in the future. It seems like if I'm a consumer looking for the best product for the future, getting it now might be a better solution than waiting, right? Because then it might be outlawed, and then you might be stuck with whatever you're stuck with.
Yeah, and I think there's a great element there, Jason, that I think hit on is, you know, getting out and having early replacement. We know through statistical data that majority of water heaters are over 10 years old, which means they're in the replacement phase. That information is published by the DOE, so that's readily available. If your unit, whether it's tankless or tank or anything, heating water, and it's over 10 years old, you should be looking at a replacement. The other thing that's like really nice about that is whenever there's a change in equipment or technology, there's always going to be a cost adder, right? So like we can't just sit in this bubble and say, okay, like decarbonization is going to happen and it's going to be equal to the current cost. Maybe in the long term that's going to happen, but in the short term, we know there's going to be added costs that don't exist if you have gas infrastructure, right? And I think that's the big thing, for a consumer and the discussion from the contracting base is letting people know what those regulations actually mean. Yes, okay, yeah, going for decarbonization, you maybe have to have a panel upgrade. We're not going to have to run higher gauge electric wire to put a heat pump in. There's a lot of things that I think the consumer base and the contracting base right now isn't thinking about, and those have a significant impact on the adaptation of technology, right? So our goal is how can we overcome those barriers, right? And how can we make installations easier? But unfortunately, there's just some areas where you can't.
So, if I could just bring it back a little bit, you're throwing out like decarbonization, you're throwing out policies. Like, what exactly how does this affect, I guess, manufacturers and the product landscape, and then to the contractor? Like, how does that trickle down?
Yeah. So I think if we took California as an example just to start, because they have some of the most stringent rules that they're trying to publish of all the states. in the U.S. And I think if you look at the federal ruling, which it's NECA, um, which stands for the National Appliance Energy Conservation Act. That's what NECA stands for, and it's in the fourth version currently, and right now it's being proposed for what the rule is going to be. So what we believe the rule is going to be is that non-condensing tankless is going to go away. Resistance electric heaters are going to go away with some exceptions because of size. Everything's going to transition to a heat pump. So it's fairly aggressive. We're expecting probably by November of this year, 2024, that we'll see that proposed draft. And then it'll be open for discussion, and then implementation is usually 4 to 5 years down the line. So by like 2030, we could expect anything that comes from NECA 4 to be implemented, pending lawsuits or challenges from administration or utilities, because a lot of times what we see is that the DOE and the federal government likes to propose rules that harm consumers. A lot of times it's, yes, there's some great things that get done, but then there's a lot of missed foresight, right?
Right.
So the whole goal is yes, we know that a decarbonization future is in the horizon, but is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 15 years? Is it by 2050? I think those are the big questions that are out there. And I think the biggest thing from a manufacturer's perspective is, we're working to make sure that we have a complete portfolio, whether it's, in 3 years, 5, 10, that the goal is that we have a complete portfolio of innovative, efficient equipment, whether it's electric or gas, to support our customer
Condensing
base.
or non-condensing,
Yep.
regardless what's available. But
Yep.
I mean, just to elaborate on that, just from the contractor perspective of, where do we use non-condensing products? I mean, tons of applications, especially in Southern California, where you can put it outside and put them in small ADUs. There's just a lot of things that are being pushed, that these things are great for. And like I say, either way, we're going to have the right product for the right application, but just want to make sure that we're, able to provide the contractors what they're looking for on the field.
So to spell it out plainly, you're talking about just getting rid of gas and gas products. I mean, I think I speak for a lot of us when I say it. Hearing this, we're all a little incredulous. Like, really, how are they going to just get rid of a product category like that? But you're saying that there's actually a roadmap in place, and it seems this is like for real.
Yeah. So I think that reaction from a lot of people, that's a common reaction. As I've been working in this industry, every time I hear that and see how it's transformed, because we have to remember that energy policy, like if we don't start working on energy policy today, it's not going to happen, right? So that's why there are such aggressive policy asks, because we know it's going to be chipped away.
Find somewhere in the middle.
It's exactly, it's going to get worked down. So I think, from the manufacturer's perspective, we need to be prepared and flexible to be innovative with whatever new technology happens. And we are. And I think from our customer base and our contracting base, we need to be able to provide them tools to be able to meet those ever-changing demands. I can remember when tankless was a small percentage of the water heating market, and today it's a fairly large chunk of the gas equipment. And this is going to be a transition and change very similar to when tankless came to the market, but I think there's going to be more push from a federal perspective, and a government requirement, and whether it's state or federal, that's going to really dictate the equipment, right? That's what's been made pretty clear, is that they want to achieve the highest efficiency period to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Just as an example, the reason that California is so aggressive is they have the most water heaters of any state actively in residential applications. There's something like 10 million residential water heaters installed in the state of California. So when you hear that number, which is significant, right? That's why California wants to have such aggressive rules around decarbonization, is that they know that if they can remove those 10 million gas water heaters, that's a significant carbon reduction.
But when you go to these meetings and there's all these members of people that are outside of California,
Yeah.
what's their perspective, you know?
Yeah, I think you really got to look at it and say, okay, well, California's got to do it because the populace is so big, and they have so much gas equipment installed. When you go to these other states, the population's smaller, they don't have as much gas distribution, and there isn't as much gas available or installed, right? So I think that from their perspective, they don't need to be as extreme because they're maybe 1/6 the amount or less of gas equipment installed. So for them, they're maintaining a low overall carbon emission. But I think that there's always room for improvement, right? So I think what you'll start seeing is like we hit on a little bit earlier with hydrogen H2 mixture, is that's going to satisfy a lot of the other states. So I think you're never going to see, I don't think, a policy till 2050 or later that's going to really eliminate gas nationally. I know there's a lot of states that have actually proposed rules to banning gas, and I think there's actually more states that have bans on banning gas than states that have banned gas altogether. So I think it makes sense where it makes sense, and the policy and the rules are being done for a reason. But the reaction, I think, from anybody that hears it, right, is the same as like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe that this can happen. And I think, that's how it always starts out, right? The shock, and then it gets transformed. There's some great gas equipment on the market today. It's kind of newer technology that has 140% efficiency, right? Like so. You've got gas-fired heat pumps, right, with absorption technology that can do space heating and domestic. They can operate at extremely cold climate, and their AFUE rating is 140%, right? So it's 140 AFUE. So there's technology like that that's going to proliferate the market. And then when you combine in hydrogen mixture, it only reduces and greenerizes. I don't even think that's a word.
Is that a word?
I don't think it's a word, but really makes the distribution of gas greener. And I think that's really what they're trying to achieve is with renewable natural gas, whether it's coming from food waste or hydrogen blending, there is a goal to achieve cleaner gas distribution.
Since this mostly, I guess, affects California in the immediate future, do you think other, is it worth paying attention to? Is it going to still affect, I guess, the rest of the country? Is it going to affect manufacturers across the board where since California is doing it and they want to, maybe sell products in California?
Well, that's a lot of times how it happens, though, right? I mean, laws and regulations that are put in place in California, like it or not, throughout the other portions of the country, just because there is so much manufacturing done for California, it affects the production to not have a model just for California and then for the rest of the country. It just goes across the board. So
yeah, I think that's a good point, Jason. I think over time, the technology, people want to compete for the dollars and the available sales channel in California, right? I mean, it's roughly 40 million people. And if we're talking about water heaters, right, residential is 10 million that are installed. So it's a very large market to play in. And from a manufacturer's perspective, I think you want to compete in that space. But I think overall, it's going to be one of those wait and see type of things, right? Like, is the rulings really going to be implemented? If they are, products going to be available, and then how do we as a whole industry, right, look at it beyond some states on the west and in the northeast? I mean, right, there's areas where it doesn't make sense to decarbonize, right? Extreme cold technology just doesn't exist today to be in extremely cold climates. Where you're below -20 is your design temperature for certain applications, Fahrenheit. The technology just doesn't exist, right? So I think we've got to look at it that way too, of like, where is the practical application for decarbonization versus just saying it's a blanket statement and we're going to put it everywhere, right? Like that's
Decarbonization seems like a kind of a distant future goal, right? But is there anything like real short term that is worth noting?
Yeah, I think the policy you start seeing in like the Northeast and on the coasts, right, is really the furthest along, and I think that that's really going to start driving other policy for other changes in other markets and possibly even federal standards. If you have like the West Coast and then the Northeast decides to go to very aggressive policy and it gets implemented, then everywhere else is going to have that same, trickle down effect, right? Um, like an example, right? Ultra low NOx, right? California is the only state really with below 14 ppm, but everybody makes their product to California standard. So whether you're in a different state or not, and you have the compliance requirements, you're getting product that was designed
With more
specifically for,
efficiency in mind. Yeah.
yeah, for specifically for more efficient markets.
What region did you say was the furthest along?
I would say it's the coasts, right? Like
Okay, right.
the Northeast and the West.
So Northeast, like what? Do you have an example of how they're kind of further along than others?
Yeah, so I mean, you're starting to see in like Massachusetts, there's large rebates available for making decarbonization transitions, and those transitions are essentially going from gas heating to electric heating via hydronic space heating, hydronic heat pumps. Um, but there's challenges to that, right? Like infrastructure challenges where, you may have to have a panel upgrade, you may have to have service upgrade, the cost of the equipment's greater. There's a lot of challenges to meeting that requirement. So, you know, my perspective and my 2 cents of being in the industry is a hybrid technology is going to be the future, right? Where we use gas for its value of high heating capability, low cost for now, um, and that's used to offset peak load times, right, for electricity. So I think you're going to run into that scenario where, okay, like there maybe aren't states that are as far along as California and other Western states with decarbonization and electrification. You know, people I think forget California has been working for over 20 years with Title 24 on new construction to keep pushing that boundary. And a lot of what's going to happen is you're going to see, yeah, there's more houses and population grows, but there's going to be more demand on the grid, even though there's going to be a transition to electricity because each home is going to be able to generate and store electricity, right? And that's what I think a lot of people miss in the discussion where they're like, oh, we're going to do this because we see them doing it, and it's like, okay, well, they've been working for quite some time. I think it's been 7 years since solar panels have been mandatory on new construction.
Right.
And now the new version of the code requires battery backup and, preparation for, completely going electric. So, range top locations have to have the 240 outlets for, transition to induction or something like that. But you're going to start seeing that. And I think Europe's already gone kind of down that road of like, hey, we're going to kind of mandate all electric. And then they've kind of walked that back to hybrid, where basis of design is going to be some version of a heat pump with gas as a backup. So I think that's the inevitable long term.
I know you've brought up hydrogen a couple times, but how feasible is it? Like you went to a concept house, right? Where
Yeah.
it was. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So Southern California Gas has a really cool display that anybody can go see. I mean, you can make a appointment.
Open to the public, though.
It's open to the public. And what they did is they actually built a microgrid. So what they're doing is they're bringing water in, and then they're using electrolysis to separate it to make hydrogen and oxygen. And the waste oxygen is actually medical grade oxygen that they could literally bottle and sell. But there's also some discussions like they could actually recapture the oxygen and then run it through some sort of generator to create more electricity. So what they've built there basically can power 100 homes. And what it does is that in the daytime, they have a solar array. So all the power is coming from solar. And then that's running the equipment to do the hydrogen generation. And then the hydrogen is being stored. And then at night, it's being used to run a fuel cell and be blended in with the gas. So there's gas equipment in the house, but it's essentially disconnected from the electric grid.
So it would be almost self-sufficient for up to 100 homes.
Yep.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and they're doing the blending there right on site. So the hydrogen's being mixed in. They're running it at 20% right now. Um, it's a really cool concept, and I think that
So we could see a few of those concepts coming up, maybe in California because it makes sense because you have all of the elements that are required in order to do that. Where again, maybe in other areas you don't. But it's cool to be able to see that there's going to be capabilities and still utilizing
right.
our products, right?
Yeah, so I think like that's the other thing too is like there's a lot of intense investigation from even the electric utilities into how can we scale some of these like microgrid hydrogen powered systems to be large scale power delivery capable. And really, what the microgrid shows that Southern California Gas is set up is that you have the ability, if you're a builder, to put in a microgrid, and you don't have to run really electricity to any of the houses. You can run natural gas to every house, and I mean, you'd run electricity from your microgrid, but it wouldn't be connected. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, in those areas.
So I have to admit, some of the stuff that we've been talking about seems kind of, chicken little skies falling kind of stuff. Like, oh, they're gonna get rid of gas, but but really, what is the, I guess, ultimate reality that you would like kind of everyone to understand when it comes to all of this decarbonization and all the policies and stuff like that? And
Yeah, I think what we really need to look at is we as manufacturers are prepared. We're following this closely. We're looking down the road as well, and it's not going to be an overnight decision, right? It's not going to be tomorrow. You can't go down to your local wholesaler, your local supply place and pick up gas equipment. That's not what's happening. It's going to be far out there, right? A lot of stuff's being proposed in 2026, and implementation, is going to be between 2029 and 2030. So, we've got a very long runway. We have 6 years. We don't know what's going to happen in those 6 years. But some version, some form of decarbonization or increased efficiency, I think, is really what it needs to be looked at. Is how can we reduce our gas footprint and our gas consumption, which basically means how do we cut carbon emissions, but still have the comfort, right? Um, because that's the other side is, when you look at somebody who has a tankless today, right? Like, how did the trend go, Jason? Like, we started out with 40-gallon tanks in our houses,
Yep.
and now we're at tankless, which everybody loves the comfort.
Well, we started with tankless of a different version, and then we've moved and evolved, and it's the same thing, right? There's just going to be a continual evolution. And like you said, I mean, the most important part is the consumer knows that the manufacturer is coming out with products that are going to fit the regulations that are being proposed and required. And the contractor knows that the manufacturer is going to provide education and support when it comes to the products that we continue to produce. So that's the thing for me as a manufacturer is that we want to make sure that the contractor is aware that we are vested. Eric's obviously very knowledgeable about all the regulations and changes that are coming, and we're investing in participating in different events and shows, and just making sure that we're as knowledgeable as possible about what the future could hold, will hold, and then bringing that back and producing products, and then sharing that information with our customer base.
but this is definitely going to shape the industry for the next few years because
Absolutely,
making products and developing products isn't just a overnight
it's not a
thing.
quick thing.
So
No,
everyone now is paying attention to this so they can figure out their roadmap and what they're going to produce later on because they don't want to make a product that all of a sudden becomes obsolete
absolutely,
after however many years of R&D and
yeah.
you know
That's a great point. I mean, things that we do and we work on, a roadmap that we had 5 years ago is drastically different than a roadmap for now. And I wish that the lawmakers took that into account a little bit more. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of research and R&D that goes into trying to find the right products, make the right products, and it takes time. But we're heading the right direction, and we'll be ready.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway I think if you're a contractor is the education is going to be available. Nobody's going to be abandoned. There's not going to be a quick shift where all of a sudden you feel like, hey, I didn't know what's going on. So there's going to be constant dialogue going on. This is not just a, single manufacturer, concern, right? This is a industry wide like gas appliance concern, right? That's happening because it's not, a lot of the regulations and requirements like, we're in the water heating side, right? And the boiler side. And we see and focus on that, but this affects every piece of gas equipment, right? It's not just.
But I would say, I mean, for contractors to prepare, right? There is the mindset of a manufacturer that we need to prepare, but I think a contractor also needs to think, how am I going to prepare, right? And for them to have the knowledge of the fact that there's going to be changes to the way that you currently do things, it's important to learn about electricity. It's important to learn about, the different aspects of an installation that could be coming. So I wouldn't stay, so set in the ways that you do something on a specific product that you install. Maybe start learning about things. We offer education, we offer training. Look into that so that you can kind of see different ways that are available, and the applications may be different in different markets. So
Yeah, that's a great point, Jason. I think, looking at right now, we have a heat pump water heater available, and while it's not code, it's not mandated. Nobody's saying to a contractor like, "Hey, you have to transition completely." It's, "Hey, maybe do 1 or 5 a year
sure, try it.
and get comfortable
Sure.
because the transition's going to happen, and there's going to be support out there from the manufacturer, from us, from everybody." But I think the sooner that people can experience it, and that ramp isn't as difficult
Yep.
to get on board with wherever the transition is, if product's been available and you have that time, like let's take advantage of the 6 years we have to make sure that we're all comfortable, right?
And the same thing for what you said about condensing to non-condensing. I mean, if there's contractors who haven't been introduced to condensing products, I would urge you to try to learn as much as you can. Try to figure out what the best way to, run that condensation line is. Learn a little bit about it so that when the regulations do change, if they change, when they change, whatever the wording is, you're prepared. So
All right, well, we're right at time, so let's wrap this one up. I'd like to thank you, Eric, for providing some deep insight in the industry for us, and I hope that our audience walks away feeling a little more knowledgeable about the upcoming changes and potential shift that's on the horizon. As always, our show notes and links are available at noritz.com/podcast. Follow our socials at instagram.com/northamerica and youtube.com/northamerica. Until then, we'll catch you on the next Talkin' Tankless.